Good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to call the meeting of the WSESU to order. I have something to read. The meeting of the WSESU will come to order. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or of the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us by email. In the event of a technical difficulty that cannot be resolved, we may continue the meeting if necessary to time and place certain. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mo and whatever other forest creatures assisted her in straightening out the Zoom last night. Just wanted to make sure that was on the record somewhere. Mark, you had mentioned that you might want to rearrange the agenda a bit. Is that still the case, or shall I just proceed with?
It depends on if Mike has joined the Zoom meeting yet.
He has.
Okay, so we could stay with the current agenda.
Okay, super. Please stand by. I'm having technical difficulties.
That's
okay. So we'll now enter the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion for the approval of minutes of February 14th, 2024.
So moved.
So moved.
Well, Deborah wins.
Are there any additions, corrections, deletions? All those in favor?
All those in favor, please.
Aye.
Sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you very much, everyone. I would like to move that we approve the warrants and payrolls as follows. The warrants of February 14th, 2024 in the amount of $682,852.51.15. The payroll period of 2/9/2024 in the amount of $603,439.59. The warrants of February 28th, 2024 in the amount of $1,032,125.95. And the payroll period of February 23rd, 2024 in the amount of $601,645.82. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you very much. The warrants and payrolls are approved. Moving on to finance. Frank, what have you got for us?
Well, just very briefly report. I want to let the board know that we have finished the fiscal year audit. It's pretty much wrapped up in December, but the auditors are just binding the reports now. So maybe it could be next meeting or a meeting relatively soon if we want to put that on the agenda. I'm glad to review the fiscal year end audit with the board, and maybe also the year-to-date financials as well. The other thing you just wanted to mention, even though it's not really SU business, in the event that folks have seen a couple of the recent articles in the paper regarding use of the Tenney Field, I'll just mention that we're well on our way to moving through the application process with the Agency of Education on the outdoor learning improvement for the grandstand. And of course, it's important for us to do that because the ESSER funding is no longer available after September 2024, which is right around the corner. So we're moving forward with that project as quickly as we can, but at this point we don't have a final design or a specification, so we need that, and then we'll be proceeding. But I'm referring to an article or two just about the availability of that field, the Tenney field, and it's related to this project, just as a kind of an FYI. And that's all I thought I'd report tonight, Ann.
Thank you, Frank. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Frank?
It feels rather odd that finance is quite so short right now. It feels as if we should have about 10 questions.
Something is wrong.
Yes, that's right. That's right. What's wrong, Frank?
Well, we had a lot of questions last night, which was good, and of course that's where all the kids are. So that's appropriate in my view. So, but
I was joking.
I know.
Thank you.
Okay then, thank you again. And well, Mark, looks like we're ready for your administrative report.
Okay, sounds good. So for tonight, we have Michael Kelleher joining us on Zoom, who's our HR director and our Title IX coordinator, who will be doing kind of an outline of the HHB policy, work that has been done, work that we will be doing in the summer and into next year. We also, Paul Smith will give us an update on ed quality standards. And then I would like to, at the end of the report, give the board an FYI around April 8th, the upcoming solar eclipse, and how we're going to handle that as a supervisory union. So, Mike, if you're prepared, we can start with your presentation. I don't know if you can share, or you can share, Mike, or maybe Ann could share,
Or I can share.
or Carrie could share the PowerPoint. What do you prefer?
I'm gonna try. Can you see that? Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Hallelujah. That's the moment of truth.
Ooh.
All right. So, this is just as Mark mentioned, just a general overview of HHB. And I hope at the conclusion of this presentation, you have sort of a sense as to what school districts need to be considering when an allegation of harassment or hazing or bullying is brought forward. What are some of the standards that we use in terms of an analysis of a particular issue? So feel free to ask any questions. I'm going to start out with sort of a general, if I can get this thing away, a general overview of the different categories of HB, but then I'm going to dive into it much deeper. So this is sort of the stuff you're going to see if you were to turn to our policy right now. It's a little bit condensed for the purposes of the slides, but as everyone knows, the wellspring for all of this is really the Civil Rights Act of 1964, how that law has evolved over time, how there have been additional laws like ADA that have brought forth onto the landscape, as well as court cases. So harassment, I'm going to ask you to bear with me. This part's kind of boring. Harassment means an incident or incidents of verbal, written, visual, physical conduct, including any incident conducted by electronic means. It's based upon or motivated by a student's or student family members' actual or perceived race, creed, color, national origin, marital status, disability, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Again, those are all brought forth by the Civil Rights Act and also by other laws that have been put in place. I keep on doing that, I apologize, over time. The key is that there's a purpose of this behavior is that it has the effect to objectively and substantially undermine or detract the targeted student's educational performance or their ability to access school resources. So that's harassment. Hazing. Hazing is the intentional, knowing, or reckless commitment of an act by a student, whether as an individual or as a group, in relation to the targeted student's pledging or affiliation with a particular organization on campus, whether that's athletics or some sort of academic affiliation. Hazing is based upon that person's participation in that group, and initially was all sort of focusing on athletic teams, but now it's been expanded. And then the third one, bullying, is overt acts or combination of acts, including by electronic means, directed to a targeted student or group of students, which is repeated over time, is intended to ridicule, humiliate, or intimidate the student, and either occurs during the school day on school property or school bus, or did not occur during the school day or school property, but has been shown to have substantial interference with that targeted student's right to access educational programs. So that's kind of the general overview. And in a moment, I'm going to kind of drill down as to what sort of we look at when these sort of things occur. But let me just kind of go into the next slide, which talks about types of harassment. There are a number of different types of harassment. These are the primary ones. Sexual harassment, harassment based upon sexual orientation. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about those in terms of Title IX, what it means. Racial-based, gender identity-based, color, national origin, disability, religion, creed, and marital status. So that's sort of the different types of harassment that can occur. Typically you see a little bit more of the racial harassment or the religious-based or the sexual harassment, which leads us into Title IX.
Can I ask a question, Michael?
Sure,
is that
please.
okay? Yeah. So as I look at the definitions for harassment and bullying, and I sort of use them interchangeably, these terms, and obviously they're very precisely defined. But is there? I mean, there is an overlap, isn't there, between harassment and bullying? That's a question.
I hope to show that, is there an overlap? Sure. I mean, where does harassment stop and bullying begin? Usually, though, the thought is that they are distinct, but they can kind of combine. They can occur concurrently. So you might have an incident that would be harassment, meeting that definition, and bullying. And so that's kind of where you get the overlap. But that makes sense at all?
Yeah, it does. Sure.
Okay. And please feel free to ask questions. I'm looking at the PowerPoint presentation on my screen, so I can't see any of you. So if you raise your hand, I can't see it. So just jump in there. So Title IX is really focused in on sexual harassment and gender-based harassment. And so what's the difference between an HHB situation and a Title IX? Title IX requires us to do a much more strictly determined set of protocols. When something comes up that's a Title IX situation for us, I have and I didn't create it, it was shared with me by an attorney. I have this flow chart that kind of dictates, okay, if this, then that. If not this, then go to the next step. And so that's the sort of flow chart that requires us to then be in contact with the various parties. The various parties could be, sorry about that again. The various parties could be the complainant, the respondent, the person who's being accused. It could be DCF. In some situations, it might even be the police. So then there are set protocols and documentation requirements that are really time consuming. Not that an HHB is not, but it's just much more strictly governed by regulation. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's look at sort of the guidance in Vermont from the AOE for us on HHB situations. And so when something occurs that's relative to hazing, we look to see if it is more than just demeaning conduct between students. It requires intentional action. So in other words, if there's the allegation of hazing, but if the respondent, the person being accused, didn't intend for that to happen that way, then arguably it's not a form of hazing. So that's kind of one of the elements of the analysis that we do. It also has to be something that is in connection with a school affiliated group. So automatically you're seeing a couple elements that separate hazing from the other two categories. One of them is intentional. The other is relative to that complainant student's affiliation with a particular group. There's also an additional requirement that there's proof of endangering behaviors. In other words, it has to put the student at risk either for their emotional or physical well-being. So what does this mean? It means that it's something that is just embarrassing to somebody may not necessarily be hazing under the regulations. I know that seems like splitting hairs, but those are the things that we have to look at when we're doing this type of analysis. Any questions about that before I go on to harassment?
Mike, in your experience, has our district ever had any reports of hazing?
Remember, I've only been doing this for 9 months, and I can recall one. Whoops. Is that me or is that somebody else?
No, that's Deborah.
Sorry. I can only recall one particular situation that comes to mind.
Oh, I'm surprised. One.
It is more along the lines of harassment and bullying. Bullying slightly ahead of harassment. And as I mentioned earlier, harassment typically along the lines of either sexual harassment that leads us to Title IX or racially based or religious based.
And maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but this is important to me. Title IX cases, in your 9 months, how many have you investigated?
I apologize. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I want to say at least 8 have come up. Now that doesn't mean they were fully investigated. There are requirements.
8?
Yes.
8. No, 8. 8. 8. 8. 8.
Oh, I heard 80 as well.
No, I apologize.
And you said brought up, but not necessarily investigated?
Yes.
Okay.
So what happens in a Title IX, just at the outset, is you make contact with the complainant, and obviously in most cases the complainant happens to be a minor, so you reach out to the parents and you explain what's been reported or observed, and you ask the question, is this something you want to follow up with? I'd say more than half of the time, the complainant parents say no, they don't want to follow through. Now, it doesn't stop there. If as your Title IX coordinator, if I feel a situation really needs to be investigated, and there's been one, we will do the dive into finding out more about it. Does that make sense? And I apologize for the dogs barking in the background.
Back at you.
So if the
So
family says no, you still as Title IX can move forward.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I did not know that.
And
Harassment. So harassment does not, unlike hazing and unlike bullying that we're going to talk about in a second, harassment does not require intent. And so under the definition of harassment for our purposes, it has to be more than just, it has to be proof more than bigoted, racially charged, or sexist behaviors. The behavior has to be shown to have an effect of substantially and objectively impacting the targeted victim, student's educational experience. So what does that mean? It doesn't have to, we don't have to have intent here, but objectively, and that's where the investigator and the Title IX coordinator come in. You have to make the determination that, yes, this behavior impacts the student's experience. And it has to focus on impacting either their access to school, their performance in school, or to create a hostile environment in school. Any questions about that? Okay. Bullying. This again requires intent. So the intent here has to be to humiliate, intimidate, or threaten. You don't have to have all three to go forward with the bullying investigation, but it has to be at least one of the three. So here's an interesting part of this particular element. It does not require the targeted student to feel that they've been humiliated or feel that they've been threatened or feel that they have been intimidated, but rather it's something for us to make the determination. Yep, that behavior objectively meets the standard of being either intimidated, humiliated, or threatening. A key component of this particular focus is if the behavior happens elsewhere, such as on a weekend at the park or something like that, at a skating rink, it doesn't necessarily violate our standard. In other words, we wouldn't have to investigate it unless the complainant says, hey, you know what? This happened off campus. It happened on the weekend, but I feel really intimidated by this particular action. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's what we sort of look at when we do the analysis of a particular claim being raised. Oops. So during the past 9 months, I've been appointed as the Title IX coordinator. Last August, Pietro Lynn came into a meeting of all admin and did a great presentation. I found it personally very helpful. We're working with all the admin team to improve our responsiveness, easy for me to say, responsiveness to the parties involved, both complainant and respondent. And then I think, as Frank probably had shared with you, we're now part of the VIII family for our insurances. And they've got
Vermont Insurance, School Board.
Trust.
Yeah.
insurance trust. Yep. so they have tremendous resources that we can tap into, including trainings. They've got a HR help button that we can pose a question and have a lawyer respond back to us. They have an Ask the Lawyer feature around Title IX cases. So they've been great to deal with. As we look forward, starting next month, Heather Lynn is doing a series of HHB and Title IX trainings. I'm going to be attending 5 of the 6. The sixth one I won't be attending only because I'll be on vacation. These are the titles. What is HHB? How do we define it? When do we need to investigate it? What do you do once you do the investigation? What do you do afterwards? So these are some of the trainings that not only myself, but a couple of our principals are going to be attending. We're developing procedures to increase the understandability of HHB and the Title IX processes, especially around the Title IX processes. There is really pretty confusing. Additional focus on data collection and metrics. And then continued training of our admin team. There'll be, again, the August retreat. And then we're going to do some quarterly follow-up meetings with either group sessions, group discussions, tabletop exercises, or even case studies. So that's the direction we're headed in.
I have a comment, Mike.
Sure.
So I did a little homework in anticipation of this discussion, which I think is pretty important. One of the criticisms of HHB policies in general in Vermont from the HHB Advisory Council is that policies are very often crafted to protect the school and not really to prevent it from happening. Just a comment.
Well, I think, yeah, sure, Tim. I think without a doubt, I'm new at this, so I'm not going to tell you I'm an expert by any stretch. But I see your point. My reaction is that's why you collect the data. That's why you look. That's why you collect the data. That's where you look for the trends. Why do these things happen? Are they happening in a particular school? And you have to look at that. Are they happening? Are particular types of scenarios being repeated over and over again? And when you do that analysis, then you can come up with action plans to address that in terms of preventative measures. So I don't think that's been done not only by us, but I don't think that's been done by a lot of school systems, except maybe like Burlington or some of the larger ones. So that would be one of my objectives is to look at the data, see what it tells us, and then learn from it.
And then it brings me to my second point. And I agree with you. Begin with the data. What does it say? The problem is an anomaly in Vermont is that only 1 to 2% report bullying as defined by the state, compared to 20% nationwide. And nobody knows why. I'm not sure what our youth risk behavior survey shows, but it just seems like for some reason in Vermont it's underreported, or it doesn't exist.
My reaction to that is maybe the other states do a better job than we do in terms of educating our students, teachers about what this is. And so maybe if we share with them not only what to be aware of and how to report it better, and actually what we can do to help folks, maybe that would bring forth more cases. I don't know. That's just an observation.
And then my last point, and I'll shut up. The Student Advisory Committee, no. The Student Advisory Committee has brought this up, and you might have heard from our student rep on the board, that the problem isn't so much bullying. Well, it's microaggressions. And you might be talking about bullying, and the student will say that's not a problem because they define it differently when it's microaggressions, which according to several students is a problem.
It is a problem. And Tim, it's not just a problem with our students, it's a problem with society. I will tell you this, Tim. I came from an organization, Behavioral Health Network down in Springfield, where we invested in social justice way ahead. The only other organization that I know I was aware of in all of Western Massachusetts, from the Berkshires out towards Worcester, was Bay State Health. And so we invested significantly in social justice, not only for our staff, but for those patients that we were serving, the 56,000 or so. And so one of the things that I learned from that, because I didn't realize all of this. And what I learned starting 7 years ago was that microaggressions are a problem. And again, like the other things I'd mentioned, you have to help people understand and appreciate what they are. And then you also have to have the folks that are doing the microaggressions, you have to have them appreciate what their behaviors are. And that is challenging. I have been in training sessions where there were very heated discussions among, managers that, you would hope had a lot of a relative degree of maturity. But the great thing about that experience was after we brought it to the light of day, there was that aha moment for most people. And they got it. And so if you want to talk about stopping microaggressions, Tim, my opinion, and I'm not an expert, but my opinion is you've got to reach out, make people aware of them, and then make them understand what their impact is to others. And most people will come around and say, yep, that's right. Not everybody will. Unfortunately, not everybody will.
Yeah, I could not agree more. This is personal to me, my family, so yeah, I could not agree more.
Should be personal to all of us.
It should be.
So are we making a distinction between microaggressions and bullying?
Again, Deborah, as I mentioned, you brought this up, there's overlap. So I think microaggressions turn into bullying.
Sorry, say it one more time.
Microaggressions can turn into bullying. Usually I'm not an expert. I'm not going to even say that bullying will turn into microaggressions. It probably could, because if you address bullying with somebody and then they stop the over types of behaviors, the real noticeable types of behaviors, and then they just kind of go into these little microaggressions, these snide little comments. Sorry for the term, but so there is that sort of degrees of problematic behavior. We got to start somewhere. And I think the starting point is trying to address HHB first and foremost, learning from our HHB data, doing something about it, and then working on, and I know there are other people in our organization, Michaela and other folks that are really trying to lead the way on addressing the microaggression questions.
I certainly hope that in addressing microaggressions, they are not minimized as being less harmful than acts of bullying.
I agree.
Because microaggressions are not just, one moment in time. They are repeated from the same individual to the same individual. And it may be perceived, the intent may be, this is just a joke. Why do you have a chip on your shoulder? Mm-hmm. But the impact is not perceived as a joke. It's perceived as intended to ridicule, humiliate, or intimidate. And it's repeated over time. So I'm just looking at these definitions, and there certainly have been reports in the school community where the term is bullying, but it may not be officially bullying, it may be.
But it still needs to be addressed.
But it still needs to be addressed at the same level. I don't care what it's called. A microaggression is dreadful. It will chase people out of a community. It will chase people out of an opportunity, out of a class, out of employment.
Yeah.
I don't see how that is anything other than bullying.
It's like death by 1,000 paper.
Well, yes, it doesn't go away. It just seethes and builds and builds and builds. So anyway, I appreciate the definitions. I just hope in investigating situations that microaggressions are treated really seriously. I have a question. I realize, when we were looking at the Title IX policy in on the policy committee, the issue came up again that families do not always follow through on a Title IX investigation, where the school determines that it's Title IX and it needs to be. So I'm wondering, why do families step back from a full-blown investigation?
Again, only having done this for 9 months and only have seen in a handful of Title IX, I don't know if I'm well qualified enough to answer that. But I think, maybe one way of looking at it, Deborah, is this. Unfortunately, we have folks that witness crimes in the real world, but they decide not to get involved for whatever reason. I don't know if that's a valid analogy.
I've heard from parents, and I've read in too many reports. The answer is in one word: retaliation, or at least fear of retaliation.
Let me bring up another idea or thought. I've read both policies probably for 8 years now. And thank you, Michael. This is probably the best presentation where I actually feel like I am coming close to almost being at a point of getting a little bit of understanding. These policies are dense. Mm-hmm. These policies are difficult. These policies are very much legalese. I do wonder if many families walk away because if the first thing they're handed is a Title IX policy, I'm going to walk away at paragraph number 1 and just say, I don't know what you want from me. I wish we had, and I know we've talked about this in Vernon, an FAQ for how these things really work for parents. Yes, you can hand them the policy so that they know what you're doing, but I think there needs to be an accompanying document that is similar to your version here, which is in plain English and you can understand.
So that's actually a goal of ours. Mike and I have talked about that. Mike, you want to talk a little bit about those procedure flow charts we talked about creating?
Mm-hmm. So it's not just Title IX and HHB, but also related to things like FMLA or ADA. Again, policies that are densely written, and I don't even know if that's the appropriate phrase, Deborah, so forgive me, but are not the easiest things in the world to understand. And so what we've started to do on the ADA FMLA side of the house is to develop procedural guidelines that lend a little bit more clarity. And as part of the procedural guidelines is we're developing FAQs that help people understand, I got this question, and those are it's based upon very common questions that come up. So I would see us doing that exact same thing here, to be honest with you. And perhaps even a different set of FAQs, one for parents or for the community, one for teachers who could be first reporters, one for the admin team, who are the ones charged with often doing the investigations. So I agree with you. I would love to, once we get through the hiring crunch, which is coming up, I would love to really focus in on that.
I would also love to see something for students that's based around, if you're a student who feels uncomfortable because something has happened, here's where you can go. And it shouldn't just be go within the school. It should be, here's 3 pathways within the school, and here's a couple pathways outside of the school. So if you're not comfortable here, you can go here. And the same for students who might be watching another student going, I think something's going on there. I think my friend's in trouble and I don't know what to do. And then the same for staff and the same for parents. What do parents do if they think something's going on with their kid? And again, here's where you can go within the school, but if you're not comfortable doing that, here's where you can go outside of the school, whether it be the Women's Freedom Center or, just give people multiple pathways to work through and what they can do.
To follow up on that, one school district, I can't recall where, had a massive effort to teach students how to be responsible bystanders. So if they see something happening, they say, hey, that's not right. Students listen to students more than they listen to us. And that seemed to be an effective strategy.
Certainly individuals. Sorry.
Go ahead, Deborah, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say certainly individuals, especially young people, know how to use their phones to record what's going on. And that has proved to be incredibly important. I think a flow chart pathways for students to understand their options about who to go to in the school community, who to go to outside the school community. I think that's also critical as we move forward in the, I'm trying to figure out my wording, in the investigation of allegations of sexual abuse. I think this will be really, that would be a nice way of moving to, we really haven't figured this out, but to a phase 2. Where are we going with this? And what kind of a message do we want to leave with the community where the intensity of the past 2 years is never forgotten. In fact, that we continue to act on it, but perhaps not at a code red, but we've diminished it to a yellow. But we really need to see something in place.
The one comment I wanted to offer folks is flowcharts are nice, paper documents are okay, but I really think to reach our students, especially the folks in high school and BAMs, we probably want to do something akin to a what is it? Not a YouTube.
TikTok. You're going to do a TikTok.
I mean, we don't know if TikTok will be around much longer, but certainly YouTube is still an excellent media, and for trainings that I participate in, I it's always great to be able to then, after you do the training, you go to a YouTube video to get a refresher on what you just learned.
But I think you're right. It's got to be almost a social media campaign for students, because they're not. We can stand at the doors and hand out flyers, and they're going to make paper airplanes.
And this goes to Tim's point that it's student voices.
It's students
that need to inform students.
Yeah. But if we could work with your student group and figure out what's the best way to,
There's
once something's created, work it through.
so many students who are willing and able to do that work and want to do that work.
They probably could come up with a great,
For sure.
In addition to whatever publicity we put out, or as part of whatever publicity we put out, I think we have to manage expectations about transparency and clarity. Because it's law, we have to tread very carefully in terms of what can be reported and what can't be reported. And time and again, when I hear from students, it's, I reported it and nothing happened. When that's not actually the case. Something happened, you just didn't hear about it because you can't hear about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And parents as well. I mean, it's the same thing. We reported it, nothing happened. Well, no, actually things do happen. You just don't necessarily hear exactly what happened.
we had this issue in Vernon often on a different subject, so a less concerning subject, on residency. Parents would report saying, I don't think, Johnny's parents are living in Vernon.
Right.
And at the beginning, we would just say, okay, we'll check it out, and then nothing. And then we learned the best way was to write back to them and say, thank you for this information. We're going to pass it along to the people who need to have it. Please know we will not be reporting back to you because we cannot tell you about another student. But just know that we are doing everything that needs to be done, but this is going to be my last communication with you on this. And while it seemed harsh, in the end they said, oh, okay, as long as I know it's going where it needs to go. But you're right, you have to set the expectation that I've got the information and that's all I can tell you.
That should be SOP.
Yes.
Should.
Yeah.
So as Mike has shared, we will plan on spending quite a bit of time this summer reflecting on this school year, planning professional development, continued professional development at a retreat this summer, and then again map out the year in kind of 4 quarters to continue to bring the team together to do in-house professional development. Also balanced with the many resources that VISBIT is providing. As Mike had shared this spring, 6 workshops by Heather Lynn, she does a really wonderful job in those workshops. So we're happy with VISBIT. This has been a really nice partnership on a short term, but we've seen a lot of positive effects from joining.
Can I ask this? The school board obviously has responsibility to understand the climate of the district, how things are going. And, we get a lot of data on attendance and all that. I propose that whenever there's a Title IX investigation, that the boards, both boards, be informed of it in the executive session.
Is there anything in Title IX or in the HB policy that puts the board in as a quasi-judicial role? Because if it does, we can't hear about it up front, or we shouldn't hear about it up front. If there's a quasi-judicial role for us, we gotta be at the tail end of things.
I can send you, I don't have it committed to memory, I apologize.
Okay.
But I can send you the excerpts from the various laws regarding confidentiality, if that would be of help in terms of determining what can or can't be shared.
We don't need to know details like names. We just need to know this incident happened at this school and it's being investigated.
So at a macro level, we are keeping that data, and we certainly can report that over time as a starting point.
I think that issue came up in a policy meeting, but of course that's a policy subcommittee, not a board request. But I can't remember what's in the policy precisely. I think this is a long policy. This policy is like 26 pages or something like that. And
Yes, 28.
Or HHB? policy?
I'm thinking about Title IX.
Sexual.
I'm thinking about Title IX. But going to Carrie's point, regardless of what the issue is, at some point, it might hit board level.
Mhm.
In going through the chain of command, going to the superintendent, we're given family says, I'm not satisfied with your decision,
Right.
superintendent.
Right,
I want it brought to the board.
and I think it's always cleaner if at the point, the board is not tainted by, I saw the entire report and I've already made up my mind.
Right.
Like, that's what you don't want. If
Right.
we're the,
That's
if
what I
we
was
are,
thinking.
if we're the quasi judicial, we need to wait until the final report is put in front of us.
So,
To some degree, maybe we could, and maybe this is a Pietro
I
question,
think it is.
maybe
when
it's
there-
a what
when-
question?
a Pietro question.
Oh, Pietro.
Is this if an investigation is opened, are we at least allowed to hear in executive session, an investigation has been opened, and that's all I'm telling you? Because that's probably all you could tell us. We shouldn't get a name, we shouldn't get a circumstance, we shouldn't get anything, because it's gonna get in our heads.
It's gonna clog us up.
It's gonna clog us up.
Yeah,
So
But-
I think this, sorry, David, go ahead.
yeah, but the problem is, just to play devil's advocate, when this comes into an executive session,
Mhm.
and you simply say an investigation is ongoing, what's gonna happen? You're gonna be flooded with questions about that investigation.
Yeah.
We can't,
When
So we have a better sense of what's happening in the district.
in the district, yeah. Is there something in the policy that says report numbers annually or something like that? I don't know whether you're looking at that, right now.
I'm looking at policies.
I'm trying to,
I was sort of, watching Paul's body language.
I've got HHB, but I'm not seeing where different, Mike, is there a different Title IX policy?
yes,
Yes, there
Yes,
is.
that's the
That's
scary
yes.
one.
that's the very lengthy one.
So I think what we're trying to do is provide some more clarity around these policies
Mhm.
in terms of procedures and how to work with them. So I think we're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here.
Yeah, we're rabbit holing.
But that certainly is the goal, that we'll spend some time on this summer, that Mike will do individually, and then, collectively as a team. We can start that with the admin board retreat by looking at, macro data, at the conclusion of the school year. So, I mean, we've done a lot of work, but certainly lots more work to do.
And then just one more thing. So this is one of those things where it frustrates me that the SU is discussing it and not the SD
Or,
and Vernon.
thank you.
Vernon.
When we discuss our calendar, or when you think about the calendar, I think that this kind of thing should be considered to be a SD presentation.
I mean,
Maybe
I,
combined. We
yeah.
have
Or-
to think more about combining SU
Combining.
and SD.
Or what
presentation.
I was gonna ask Mark is, can I share, I mean, I can do it without asking
For
you,
sure,
but I was gonna
yeah.
at least ask you.
Of course.
I figured this is something the Vernon board should watch.
Yeah.
Because we've got the same issues, so.
Yeah.
And this was a great presentation that really made me understand better.
Where's Vernon?
South of the Mass border.
Oh, I'm gonna be really snarky. Oh, Flatlander? Sorry about that. Okay. Considering where I come from.
Yeah.
During I'm trying to remember where this came up. I think it was during our retreat, our most recent retreat. The issue of presentations made on the SU side of the house versus the SD side of the house. And there have been times when I, as a non-SU member, have attended an SU meeting, heard a report, and I'm thinking about a bar compare and contrast that you did one time, Paul, that really needed to be over on the SD side of the house. And that the precision of that presentation you did other presentations, but not that one. And I don't know, there's a repetition that's taking place, a duplication of effort to a large degree. And we might want to tighten that up.
I think it's a good topic to think about at the board admin retreat.
Uh-huh.
And once the new boards get established and the new roles get established, we can begin to identify folks from the admin team and then folks from the board leadership to start working on collaboratively on what that admin retreat and board retreat will look like.
And I think the conversation should also be held as SD or Vernon board members. Are you comfortable if your chairs, if you are sent an SU presentation and you can watch it, and then we have a brief follow-up, or possibly brief follow-up at individual district meetings for questions. But I think usually when I watch one of these and I see the around the table and the conversation and the questions and the answers, you usually walk away with the knowledge. So if people are willing to spend the 45 minutes that we've spent watching it on BCTV and then go, oh, okay, that was helpful, or I do have a list of questions, I'll send them to the chair can do a follow-up meeting, have Mike come to Vernon or come to the SD, and you kind of rehash it again. But everybody's homework has to be, you gotta watch it.
Mm-hmm.
We can't make admins do, presentations 3 times. That to me isn't fair. We gotta do our side of things.
Absolutely, because the goal is to consolidate and eliminate duplication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
You're not gonna wanna hear this, but as far as I'm concerned, the most efficient way to do that would be to have all policies originate at the SU level with review by a joint policy committee of the SD and Vernon.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time?
All policies originate at the SU level
Yes.
with a joint SD Vernon policy committee moving those forward.
Mhm. That sounds great to me.
You're still on the SU, so you're still running the show.
So let's note that.
Yeah,
Again,
move on.
for the notes.
I do think that's another thing we need to talk about.
Yeah.
And maybe not go down that rabbit hole
So.
right now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
But I do
Too bad
know,
fellows are red.
I do know Mike has another appointment
Ah.
this evening with his
Oh.
son, so.
So we are,
Mike, thank you very much.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Mike. Sure, there'll
Thank
be
you.
much more to come with this.
Absolutely, thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Okay, moving on, I think Paul is gonna just give an update on ed quality standards, then I'll talk about solar eclipse.
Sure, it's a bit of a nothing burger, but I because it isn't quite where we anticipated it would be. But I want to, and rather than the usual route of a PowerPoint, which I'm sure we're all tired of, let me see if I can find it there. I'm just going to quickly go to the Agency of Education website to show you where I'm going so you can go there as needed. If you go to the Agency of Education home site, which I have never found to be particularly
Nope.
friendly to navigate, this is actually doable. There's 2 places, either the State Board of Education link or the State Board and Council's down there. If you go to State Board of Education, you see a list of options, and you can start looking over here, State Board rules, etc. If you go to State Board rules, what you get is their Vermont education rules. You can also, and I'll say this quickly, the authority of the State Board arises from 16 VSA, the statutes, Vermont statutes, Chapter 16, and in turn, the State Board of Education creates rules and practices. As we develop SU policy and SD policy, we have to coordinate with those that often they will arise from either statute or the State Board rules. And we have to make sure that our policy is in accord with both of those. you can see that there are a number of state board rules and practices. They identify them in series from 1100 all the way up to 991 something, even 10,000. Now, these are not necessarily up to date. The first thing I noticed was it's still making reference to the State Department of Education, not the Agency of Education. So, and that change happened some time ago. So there need to be some updates. But what is being updated is Series 2000, the Education Quality Standards. Those are the rules for the running of schools. All right, there's other information here like the day, special education rules, but some of the core pieces are in that Series 2000. You'll see over on the other side that there's a rulemaking process, and at this point, the Education Quality Standards approved version is as of about 2016. And the state has been going through a process of updating those standards and a rulemaking process. Public comment on those ended last fall. There is a subcommittee of the state board that continues to work on it, and it looks as if the state board is ready to pull the trigger within the next couple of meetings sometime this spring on approving those. Those don't go into effect until July 1, 2025. So we're still working under the old rules, but there are a bunch of new rules in place. As far as I can determine, it's a matter of updates. Updates with respect to new governance, organizational school district organizations, all of the consolidation that happened. Language around inclusion, equity, and is included throughout. Some tech resources are updated. ELL program, there's more provisions for recognizing the degree to which we have more multiple language students in schools. Let's see, reporting of results, comprehensive improvement, continuous improvement plan updates, language with respect to flexible pathways and personalization. So it's an upgrade that's based on all the changes that have happened since the last time around. And you can find if you click on here, you get the extant version. And if you click on rulemaking, you will see, you scroll down a little bit. Education Quality Standard Rule Series 2000, there's been a process of updating, and the not quite most recent version is presented in two forms: a clean text, which just has the current language, and annotated text, which is all of the markups. And I pulled that up. That looks like this, and it should look very familiar to anybody on the policy committee in the sense that it's got all of those cross-outs and additions as you go through, right? So if you want the sort of the history of where they're at, how they've changed things, this annotated version is what you want. So, but there is also a clean version that looks likely to be very close to what's actually going to happen.
Is it a bad assumption to make that the VSBA is following this, and when all is said and done, will be able to give us an update?
I would assume you would get an update, but it's also
But it's,
totally
we can
available
watch
here
it
on
in process here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's it. Great. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Paul.
You bet.
Ian, are you okay with me moving on to solar eclipse?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So as you all know, we're anticipating we will have a solar eclipse on April 8th. In terms of Windham County, the eclipse will begin approximately 2:14 p.m. The maximum eclipse will be at 3:28 p.m. and the eclipse will come to a conclusion at 4:37 p.m. So approximately two and a half hours. So in thinking about approaching April 8th, what I've decided on, based on many conversations with folks in our school district and many other school districts, is to announce an early release day for students on April 8th. That would mean Our elementary schools would release students around 11:30, and that varies. Some times will be 11:40. And then this campus, WRCC BAMS VUHS, would release students at 12:30. Along with those early releases, we would dedicate the afternoon for professional planning time for school staff. And also preparing and planning for the early release, we'll be putting together materials to share with students and families that they can share at home. We will speak with our teachers about doing some education in the days leading up to the eclipse. And we did put in a purchase order this morning to purchase Eclipse glasses for
Good.
all students and all staff. And Deb asked about school board. We'll have enough for school board members as well.
Vernon had them at town meeting, so I've got mine.
You can't just squint.
No.
So we'll have educational materials, we'll have classes for everybody, and just feel like it's the safest thing to do based on the time of the eclipse, which is basically dismissal time at both the elementary and the upper grades. The positives are we have the materials, we have the glasses, we'll promote the eclipse, we'll educate the best way to go about it. We'll also be providing extra planning time for staff. So we think it's the best way to go. And I put together a letter that'll go out to the SU community tomorrow. So that'd be all families, staff, and board members. So we think this is enough time for families to be able to plan ahead to support that early release. That's that. Unless there are any questions, we can move on to the next item.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark, for all of that. So we are moving on to new hires and resignations. We have a new hire to recommend. I sent around information earlier, last night actually. Mark, do you want to?
I'll get started here. Yeah, I have two to present tonight, and I think one of them was sent to you at the end of February as well. And I'll start with that one, which we did announce at the Vernon board meeting on Monday. So we have a case manager that we'd like to hire that will work with Vernon Elementary and Putney Central School as the special education case manager. So this person will focus on strictly paperwork, leaving more time for other special educators to focus on teaching. So the name I'd like to present to you is Christina Hall.
So moved.
Thank you, Carrie. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Great. I will make a comment on this new vision for special education. We started this year in Brattleboro town with this concept, and about halfway through the year we did a survey of special educators asking, how do you like this? And over 90% was like positive. And we're actually attracting more teachers who would want to be special educators because getting paperwork off the table. So next hire, I'd like to promote Jimmy Lynch to the position of case manager at VUHS.
So moved. Any discussion?
I'm sorry, I was experiencing technical difficulties. May I hear that? May I hear that name again, please?
Jimmy Lynch.
Jimmy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, great. Thank you very much again. Moving on, Mark, you have a hiring committee to make a request for.
Yes, thank you. So as you all know, we're going to be hiring for 2 curriculum coordinators, pre-K through 6, and a 7 through 12 focus. Per policy D1, coming to you tonight to assign hopefully 1 school board member for each committee to participate in the screening and hiring process for both of these positions. Bryn Tucker, who's not here this evening, she's at a workshop, will be leading the charge throughout this process, and she has put together a hiring committee plan. I have paper copies. And I can forward these paper copies, Kelly, to you and electronically. Essentially, it's an outline of the process. Jobs were posted on February 21st. They will close on Friday, the 15th. The hope is that on Monday, March 18th, the committee members will Zoom to go over the process, go over the do's and don'ts of interviewing and screening, go over confidentiality agreements, and then Brandon will be sharing a Google form of the surveys. Thursday, March 21st, again, after our homework assignments of looking through the resumes, we'll come together on Zoom to identify our preferred candidates collectively, and we will narrow that down to a set of preferred candidates to interview and meet in person. On Monday, March 25th, candidate folders with questions and note sheets and rubrics will be distributed.
So there's one committee for both coordinators?
2 separate committees.
Oh.
Yeah, so we'll have one committee focused on pre-K through 6. They will conduct interviews on March 26th and March 29th. And then the committee for 7 through 12 will conduct interviews on Friday, March 29th, and then again on April 1st. And the goal is by Friday, April 5th, we'll have settled on 2 candidates, our final candidates.
So like the meeting on the March 18th, that Zoom, is that for both groups together?
We're gonna do that together, yeah.
And the same thing on the 21st?
Yeah, for efficiency.
Okay.
And so then, are you requesting 1 board member to participate or 2?
2 board members, 1 for each committee. It could be the same board member for each committee. It certainly could be a different board member for each committee. It is a time commitment. The way we're going about our committees is we'll have central office staff. That'll be essentially Bryn, who's leading the charge here, and myself as a committee member. Board member, we'll have 1 administrator, 1 principal, 1 representative from special ed, diversity, a union rep, probably multiple teachers from classroom to AST to special ed. We'll have a parent representative, an instructional coach, and that'll make up a committee of essentially about 12 people for both committees.
I'll volunteer for 7/12.
7/12?
I'm
let-
willing. I'm willing. But I won't. You're like, so I'm willing, Am, so it seems like Tim and Carrie are willing.
Wonderful. Does everybody assent to that?
Oh, yes.
I just found out I survived the recount, so you're stuck with me.
Congratulations.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was going to congratulate you because I just saw that email come in myself.
Congratulate or commiserate.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether to offer you my congratulations or condolences, but
And you like 7 through 12?
7-12.
That's perfect, because Mondays aren't as good for me,
And
so.
Colleen Savage
Okay.
won by 8 votes over Rich.
Wow, that is such a difference from the original count.
Yeah.
Or,
7 votes.
I won by 8.
you won by 8.
Only 8. Yeah.
That's a big difference from what I thought was 16.
Yeah.
Tight race.
Yeah.
Good candidates. It's a good sign.
So I will text Bryn tonight, Tim and Carrie, your names, and she'll be forwarding you information.
great. Thank you. Moving on to old business. The policy committee has gotten these policies approved at the SD level, so presented for a second reading. D7, volunteers and work study. F36, student freedom of expression in school media. And F32, student distribution of literature. Those are presented for a second reading. And since I pretty much know we've all seen them, we can move on to new business, which was intended to be a discussion about whether or not we wanted to continue policy development at the SD level, and that was because of the discussion about the transportation policy. What Paul is suggesting is, in fact, how it had been done before. For the most part, the SU did originate almost all policies, and then the assorted districts adopted them. But I don't think that that's a discussion necessarily just for this board. I think it would be a discussion for the SD board, so I think that might render this agenda item kind of moot.
I like the idea of it being on a board retreat, like where we have everybody kind of figuring it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Well,
And
that might get resolved before the retreat.
Well, when is the retreat? We're talking about the retreat the end of June?
June 25th.
Is that what we're talking about, June 25th? So what are we considering right now?
we're not. It was just, I was thinking we were going to consider just leaving things the way they were.
Uh-huh.
Paul has a point, but I don't think it is a decision for this board to make. I think it will be an everybody decision to make, like Carrie said. So
Okay,
I expect we will just keep going the way we've been going until such time as we have that discussion.
In the interim, can you repeat this proposed method that may have been from the past, but we're not doing it now? So can you just repeat it again, please?
The notion would be that policies would exist at the SU level
Mm-hmm.
and apply to both of the districts. And that the development of the policy would happen by a combined SD Vernon combined policy committee. I mean, you've never had that structure before, but I don't think
No.
there's anything
But
precluding.
then individual districts can also have a local policy if they choose.
But how would this affect, for example, the policy and amendments committee structure? Besides Carrie, would Carrie be?
It would be a new name and someone from Vernon should be there all the time.
So 2 new people to that.
I mean, I'm not technically a member of that, I just show up. So it would be, we change the name.
So it'd be an SU and a Vernon.
No, it would be an SD and, or we could call it the SU Policy Committee. We could rename it SU Policy Committee. And then we make sure that there are representatives from the district and Vernon. And then same process that's happening right now, but it is moving from the SD up to the SU. And then if the individual district for some reason says, I kind of like what they did, but I want to tweak it, then that district has the ability to, on their own, create a local board policy. We have a couple locals in Vernon.
That would be during like the first reading, giving feedback.
Right, yeah.
I have to ask this, it's my question. What's the difference between just the rep from Vernon and the SD? Where's SU?
It's, for me, and maybe you guys have a different view, the SU is the overarching authority because the state mandates that certain funding goes, if you have multiple districts, to the SU. So we are in some ways the umbrella organization. Mark is superintendent for both the SD and Vernon. Frank is the business manager for both the SD and Vernon. Paul is the curriculum director for both. So the entire central office works for both districts.
Yeah,
Nothing changes there.
but for the policy, it would just simply be Vernon, rep, and SD.
Yep, which is in effect SU.
So-
It's semantics, I
I'm
think.
I'm just
It's
trying to
total
figure out this
semantics.
flow chart. Because the way you presented it is that the SU, that everything originates with the SU. And then it funnels down to the SD and to Vernon, where they then construct the policy. But, or is it the SU? So I have down SU originates the policy.
And adopts it.
A policy would generally be adopted at the SU level and would apply to both school districts.
I see.
Because to Carrie's point, the SU as a legal entity is the authority, the executive authority.
Of the two districts.
Over the two districts. So that's the difference, Tim, to your question is that you have to have a legal body that is conducting a policy development process. You want those representatives that the policy obviously will be implemented by and abided by. But yeah, it's just like everything we do with the IRS or the tax department. You have to do business as a supervisory union board. And your meetings have to reflect that that board warned the meeting, and that's what makes it a legal process.
Okay.
Am I wrong in saying that once the SU adopts a whole bunch of policies, the boards actually wouldn't? Unless they wanted to do it differently. So in effect, if the SU board adopts a policy, the minute it's adopted by the SU board, the SD has to follow it and Vernon has to follow it. And then if at some point Vernon reads it or the SD reads it and says, nope, I don't like this language, you can change it and adopt your own local policy, as long as it's not a mandated policy.
So are we talking about all policies or are we talking about policies that are specific to the SU, having to do with food, transportation?
I think we're talking all.
We're talking about all policies.
Yeah.
Now, on a pragmatic level, if there was a desire on the part of the SD reps to that policy committee to say, you know what, we really need to run this by the whole board. There's nothing to prevent that going on a SD board agenda or a Vernon board agenda for discussion and for feedback to the reps that would then bring it back to the joint policy committee.
But this is interesting, like for the reorg, then we wouldn't ask for members, we would ask for a representative to the SU
Policy committee.
policy committee. Yeah.
Well, I mean, right now, you guys have an established SD policy committee. So the question is, where is everybody in the comfort level of, do we want to not reestablish that?
That's what I meant.
And does the SU want to do it? Or do we, as Ann said, we leave things the way they are until we get everybody in the room to talk about it, and then we dissolve something in June?
Well, I would think that we don't dissolve something until we have something to put in its place.
Or we, right,
automatically.
right.
And therefore.
We first create and then we dissolve.
Yeah, so I would hope that we're not dissolving
Mhm.
the SD policy committee, that we sort of chug along as we
Yes.
have been.
Yeah.
But with behind the scenes, looking at this reorganization.
Do you want me to try to write something up?
Yeah,
Like a little one
yeah,
pager on this?
absolutely.
Because I think I under, okay, Carrie, you write a one pager.
Because I almost feel as if that header where the SU originates all policies.
Mhm.
That's an SU policy committee that is doing the work that we're doing right now in policy, in effect,
Mhm.
and says, yes, we like this, we approve it as an SU policy, and now it affects both school districts. These policies are in effect, so mandated by the SU. Now it's up to the individual districts to assess the policy and say, do we really like it? Does it really apply to us as written?
I would think rather the feedback would be part of the discussions at the individual boards.
These are happening next.
Right, you would have a situation where the policy would get adopted and a board would not like it because the board was already having the input
I
from
see.
the board.
So the SU is in effect proposing policies rather than imposing them.
Yeah.
Is that better language?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You also obviate, if you do it at the SU level, you obviate the need for 2 additional adoptions of policy. Right? Adopt it at the SU level, it applies to both.
Let me write something up.
I think I have lots of questions about it because it's just, so writing
It's
something
different.
up will help process this.
All right, and we're happy.
And I genuinely just expected to talk about the transportation policy and whether it belonged at the SU level or not, and how you all felt about it. But no, this is great moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay, I am looking for public comment on non-agenda items, and I don't mean to call anybody out, but the only person I see online is Liz. So there's somebody in the room who has a comment.
Eileen is here as well.
Yes, but I'm not commenting.
Okay.
And going twice. Okay. And wow. So my question now is there any other business to come before this board this evening?
Are we having an executive session?
We are going to have a brief executive session under 1 VSA 313 A3, the evaluation of an employee. No action will be taken. So we are simply going to review evaluation that has already taken place. So do I hear a motion to enter into executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Carrie. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? And we are entering into executive session at 7:32. For everybody else, thank you very much for coming this evening, and thank you for your continued patience with my infirmities.